Atheists are right, not about what they conclude, but about what they demand. If you're going to claim that there is a God and that this creator of everything has spoken in history, you'd better show me something in history. Not a private whisper, not a metaphor, not, you just have to feel it, bro. If God is real, then reality should bear his fingerprints. That's the demand, and it's a fair one. And ironically, even in the Bible itself, God never expected everyone to believe without evidence. Starting right from the beginning, Genesis 3, they hear God in the garden. Genesis 18, God appears to Abraham and interacts with him. Exodus 3, a bush burns without being consumed, and a voice calls Moses by name. When Moses doubts, God doesn't say, just trust. He says, throw down your staff. Exodus 4 and on, the staff becomes a serpent, the hand turns white with leprosy, the water becomes blood, so that they may believe, he says, of these signs. And finally, when the nation stands at Sinai, they don't meditate their way into revelation, they hear the voice of God, and Moses and the elders actually see God and eat in his presence. That's the DNA of biblical faith. God acts in public so that his people can say, we saw. Even the prophets argue for faith from evidence of the past. One of the many examples for this, Micah chapter 6, for I brought you out of the land of Egypt, I redeemed you from the house of bondage. The proof is in what he did, not what somebody merely said about it. So the biblical pattern is simple. God speaks, God acts, witnesses watch, and then they remember. Then the history shifts. The temple falls, prophecy fades, and Judaism faces a problem. If God no longer appears, how can the future generations know that he's there? The answer that rises in the rabbinic era is that he's already spoken. Sinai happened, and then the Torah carries his voice forever. It's ingenious in what it accomplishes for the Jews as a people, but it's also incredibly tragic because it turns encounter into memory. Revelation becomes commentary. The God who once appeared in fire now speaks only through pages of arguments about pages of arguments. By the time you reach the medieval Jewish philosophers, they are fully sold on saying God is without a body, without a form, and to protect his holiness, they ban his appearances. And the God who cannot appear becomes the God who cannot prove himself. And the skeptic's question, why doesn't God show himself, sits unanswered, because the official position has become, he won't, but he already did. Now, that defense works inside the covenant community, the ethnic descendants of the people claiming it. You can say, our father saw, we trust them, but it doesn't work outside of it. For everyone else, it's total hearsay. And frankly, the result is obvious. The majority of Jews today hold a largely secular view of their own faith, if faith at all. And the atheist hears, wow, a group of people a long time ago saw something and we're supposed to take their word for it. Modern Jewish theology froze God in time. No more prophets, no more public voices, no more evidence. So now you have two positions that secretly agree with each other. The skeptic says, there's no evidence, and the rabbi who says, we don't expect any. Both close the door, and one calls it reason and the other calls it reverence, but the silence sounds the same. And then, right in the middle of that silence, something changes. The Christian claim steps onto the stage and says, the very same God who once appeared to Israel appeared another time, this time not as fire or thundering clouds or theophanies or prophetic visions, but as a man who regular people spoke to, touched, questioned, and even killed, yet did not erase. That's not mythic language, that's public language. In John 18, Jesus says, I spoke openly to the world. Luke starts his gospel like a historian filing a report. Not mysticism, but documentation. And Paul writes something almost reckless in 1 Corinthians, if Christ is not risen, your faith is futile. He hangs the entire movement on an event that could easily have been disproved by a single piece of evidence. A body, or even an admission from one of the apostles, not happy being persecuted, or even a forced confession under pressure, let's say. But nothing. That's the return of the biblical logic. Not blind faith, no secret messages, no oral Torah, public acts in a public time. And it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Now, I don't think this is what the Apostle Paul meant when he said that it happened in the fullness of time, but we can't help but notice how convenient it is that this claim to biblical fulfillment doesn't happen until the first century. The first century, the moment when roads connect continents, the Greek language unites many peoples, courts keep records, historians write. For the first time, claims to revelation can be checked and dated to within, from a historical perspective, what is a very small amount of time. And a rational mind could reasonably conclude that a God who values rational faith would wait for that. Not because he needs validation, but because he's built minds that test and prove things. He reveals himself this way at the very first realistic moment that humanity can preserve that proof. And so everything narrows to one weekend in Jerusalem. A man publicly executed under Pontius Pilate is buried in a known tomb. 3 days later, the tomb is empty, and hundreds of people say they saw him alive. 1 Corinthians lists some names and numbers. He first appeared to Cephas, then to 12, and then over or above 500 at once, most of whom are still alive when this claim is being made. That's an invitation. Go ask them. It's a very risky claim to make for something that could easily have been disproved and dismissed at the time. If that line had been false, Christianity collapses within a year. If it's true, then the evidence is built into the structure of history. The resurrection isn't just a miracle. It's the Sinai model reopened, proof offered in public and under scrutiny, and also preserved for all time. Acts 26, Paul says to Agrippa, "This thing was not done in a corner." That's the banner of evidence-based faith. Think about it. If God exists and he wants rational creatures to know him, what kind of revelation would we expect? Something public, something historical, something with witnesses and documents and cross-examination, and that's exactly what Christianity offers. Judaism preserves the memory of revelation, but not its evidence, and Islam, centuries later, claims to reopen prophecy, but reduces it to a private dictation. Only Christianity holds revelation in the daylight, historical and tested, and while it's not the topic for this video, universal. Even many skeptics and atheists who study the period agree with the facts. Jesus died by crucifixion. His followers believed that he rose. They proclaimed it immediately in the same city, and the movement exploded despite persecution. Those are data points, and what theory best fits them? Legend? It's way too fast. Conspiracy would be too costly. Hallucination? Too communal, and there's no precedent for that in history. Resurrection fits the evidence. But here's the paradox. Even with evidence, not everyone believes. Matthew 28, when they saw him, they worshipped, but some doubted. You can stand in front of a miracle and still hesitate, because evidence can convince the mind, but it can't command the will. That's why disbelief never goes away. Even if God literally appeared again today, many would assume it's some kind of AI technology. Skepticism is the price of freedom. If God made belief automatic, he would destroy choice. So he leaves enough light to follow and just enough shadow to refuse. Luke 16, if they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rises from the dead. That's the human condition. The issue isn't proof, it's preference. That's why they call it a leap of faith, because it is in fact a choice. And that's the point, isn't it? Light came into the world, but people love the dark because it's familiar, like Plato's cave. Because the moment you admit the light is real, you have to step into it. And that's what John 3 is saying. Light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light. God doesn't overwhelm the world with spectacle. He respects freedom enough to let denial survive. Every human being stands at that line. So now we're back to where we started. Atheists are right to demand proof, but wrong to assume that none exists. It's one of the most well-attested events in ancient history, recorded closer to its time than almost anything else we accept without question. And the truth is, if you ask most atheists, if modern, video-recorded, medically documented evidence were provided, would you believe in the resurrection? They will say that they still wouldn't believe. They'd assume there's some natural explanation we simply haven't discovered yet. And that's not an assumption on my part, that's the response I've literally been given. So even if the evidence filled the sky, some would still look away, not because it isn't there, but because seeing it would cost too much. And that's where Christianity parts ways with any other belief. It doesn't hide behind philosophy or collapse into blind faith. It stands right in the middle, built on revelation itself. The God who spoke at Sinai spoke again in history, under Roman law, under public record, The same voice that once said, "I am," from the fire, now says, "It is finished," from the cross. Acts 26, this thing was not done in a corner. That sentence is the hinge between faith and reason. So maybe the question isn't, why doesn't God show himself? Maybe it's, what are we going to do with the fact that he already has? And where have we heard this line before from John 20? These are written that you may believe. The case is public, the evidence is on record, and the verdict is up to you.